Welcome back. Today we're doing another deep dive, this time looking at investment strategies for European investors, specifically focusing on the period between 2025 and 2027.
That's right. We've gathered insights from various sources, research papers, market analysis, articles.
Exactly. And they really try to unpack the whole picture, the macroeconomy, geopolitical stuff, and where specific sector opportunities might lie. Our goal really is to cut through some of the noise these sources highlight, pull out the key insights, and give you a clearer sense of the potential landscape ahead.
Sounds good. Where should we start?
Okay, so let's set the scene first. According to these sources, what are the sort of big forces shaping this next few years?
Well, what jumps out immediately from the reading is this kind of dual challenge. You've got persistent inflation, maybe moderate, but still there, alongside, frankly, pretty high geopolitical uncertainty.
Right.
The general picture they paint is a global economy that's slowing, definitely, but not necessarily crashing into a deep recession. And there seems to be a strong consensus that central banks will probably start easing rates sometime within this window, 2025 to 2027.
Okay, so slowing growth, inflation kind of sticking around, rates maybe easing. What does this backdrop actually mean for investors like you here in Europe?
Yeah, this brings the idea of resilience right to the forefront. I mean, these geopolitical risks, they're not just abstract concepts.
Oh.
They directly hit supply chains, they reshape industries. The sources talk a lot about things like tariffs, potential trade tensions, and this trend of friendshoring.
Friendshoring, right, moving manufacturing.
Exactly, closer to home or to allies. And that forces investors really to think much harder about geographic exposure and how companies manage their supply lines.
That makes a lot of sense. Navigating that seems key. But despite these headwinds, the sources also seem pretty positive on certain growth areas. This is where it gets interesting.
Oh, absolutely. Tech is still absolutely central, and especially anything involving artificial intelligence.
AI.
Yeah?
Everywhere.
It really is. And the sources stress looking beyond just the big, obvious AI names.
Yeah.
They point to opportunities across the infrastructure layer chips, data centers,
Right.
the development tools, and maybe most importantly, how AI is actually being applied across different sectors. Semiconductors are crucial here. They're definitely sensitive to those geopolitical issues.
And cybersecurity, I saw that mentioned.
Yes, cybersecurity comes up repeatedly. It's described as having almost non-cyclical demand, fueled by constantly rising threats and more and more regulation.
Okay, so tech, AI, cybersecurity looks strong. What other growth areas did the sources flag?
Clean energy is still highlighted as a powerful long-term structural trend.
I sense a button.
Well, yeah, a bit of caution. But the sources mention this risk of greenflation.
Greenflation, meaning?
The rising cost of raw materials, maybe labor, needed for the energy transition itself. So it suggests focusing maybe on companies with pricing power or those building the supporting infrastructure or supplying essential metals.
Got it. Makes sense. Anything else?
Life sciences is another big one, driven by, aging populations in Europe and just incredible innovation, especially where genomics and AI meet in healthcare personalized medicine.
Right.
And one specific point the sources raise is this wave of patent expirations expected around 2027. Historically, that tends to drive M&A.
Ah, big pharma buying up biotech pipelines.
Precisely, creating opportunities there. And e-commerce keeps growing too, not just the retailers, but the whole ecosystem, logistics, digital payments, that sort of thing.
Okay, that covers a lot of the potential upside. What about the flip side? Any sectors facing particular challenges, according to these sources?
Yes, definitely some headwinds mentioned. Traditional heavy manufacturing, for instance, faces pressure from tariffs and rising costs.
Okay.
And the sources are pretty clear that coal demand is in structural decline globally. Natural gas. Well, it might play a transitional role in some energy plans, but that brings its own ESG risks investors need to watch.
Environmental, social, governance risks. So given this whole mix opportunities here, risks there, how do the sources suggest European investors actually, build a portfolio for this period?
A really common theme is this core satellite approach.
Okay.
The idea is you build a stable, diversified core, perhaps using broad UCITS ETFs, those regulated EU funds offering wide market exposure.
The foundation.
Exactly. And then you complement that core with a more active satellite portion. That's where you'd target those specific growth themes we talked about.
Like AI or clean energy infrastructure.
Right. And carefully chosen individual stocks. The emphasis is on companies with strong fundamentals, good pricing power, and crucially, resilient supply chains.
And managing those big macro risks. Inflation, geopolitics, how does that fit in?
Yeah, you need explicit hedges, according to these sources. For inflation, they mention things like TPS, inflation-protected bonds, commodities, maybe real assets.
And companies that can pass costs on.
Yes, exactly. Crucial point. For geopolitical risk, it's partly diversification, maybe some traditional safe havens like gold, but also looking at sectors that might actually benefit, like defense or cybersecurity, perhaps.
Interesting.
And a key insight flagged is that the old, reliable negative correlation between stocks and bonds, well, it hasn't been so reliable lately.
Meaning bonds don't always go up when stocks go down anymore.
Right, so you can't just rely on government bonds alone for portfolio resilience. You need to think broader.
Okay, so pulling all this together from the sources, it sounds like the next few years demand a balanced act. You want to capture that structural growth in areas like tech and life sciences, but stay really vigilant about the macro picture and geopolitical events and use diversification and specific hedges to manage those risks.
Precisely. And the sources really hammer home the point about selectivity. It's not just picking the right sector, but the right companies within it, understanding the details like how an ETF index actually works, or a specific company's pricing power and supply chain setup that becomes absolutely critical.
A lot to think about there, but some really valuable pointers from the sources. It feels like navigating the next few years is really about focusing on quality, resilience, and genuine innovation.
I think that's a fair summary of the perspective shared.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive into that European investment outlook. We've covered quite a bit: potential growth engines, significant risks, all based on the source material we reviewed.
Glad to discuss it.
And for you, our listener, maybe the thought to take away and mull over is this. We see these powerful forces accelerating AI, the energy transition, geopolitical shifts, all interconnected. How might these forces fundamentally change what we've historically considered the safe bets in long-term investing? Something to think about.
A very relevant question for the years ahead.
Indeed. We hope this discussion gave you a clearer picture. Join us next time for another deep dive.